I'm really honored, honestly, and privileged to be here. I would not have predicted a year ago that I would be standing here giving this keynote, in part because I'm a new convert. So I got my call to Christianity roughly about 10 months ago. So this is all quite new for me, but I'm learning quickly. And just to give you all a little bit of a story of sort of who I am, a little bit about my background. It's kind of interesting because one of the first things that you should know about me is actually that I come from a Jewish background. And I was always pretty happy with it, to be honest. But there were just a couple things that were happening in the world, that were moving, that were shifting, that changed things for me. One thing that had happened was basically, I've been for a very long time on the sort of secular, progressive, extreme left, woke, all that. And one thing that I was always really fighting for was a new economy. So I've been involved for a very long time in things like social enterprise. I'm an entrepreneur, as Emmy had mentioned. I have a cybersecurity company now that is 11 years old. We have about 60 people. But back then, sort of as a secularized Jew, I was kind of starting this stuff up, and I could sort of feel that like mixing business with spirituality was important, but I was kind of secularized, so I kind of left it, at that. But I did have some feelings when I was setting things up. And one thing that I decided to do 11 years ago was I decided that I didn't actually want to be the owner of my company. So I gave my company away for €1 to a foundation. Because it just didn't feel right being the sole shareholder of the thing when I was starting it together with other people, and I preferred to be a steward. So that was kind of the first thing. Other people found it really weird that I gave the company away. I didn't want the company to get sold. I didn't want it to have an exit, because I saw how destructive exits can actually be for companies, and I wanted this to be a social enterprise, to be an impact-driven business, and I was really trying to lock it down. These were in the days before steward ownership was really a thing. This was 11 years ago. I mean, the Purpose Foundation was started 11 years ago, so I've been doing this since before the Purpose Foundation existed. But I got this idea in my head at the time that I wanted to start a not-for-profit business. And that idea just gripped me, and it wouldn't let me go. And at a certain point, I just knew that the price of not doing it would be much higher than the price of doing it. So I did. Another thing was that, I wanted to, again, make it a social enterprise, but what on earth does that mean these days? Because there's so much greenwashing. So, I asked my friend Michiel Leenaars from the NLNet Foundation, and he said, there's a really interesting construction from the Dutch church. And it's called a fiscaal fondswervende instelling, a fiscal fundraising institution. And basically, sometimes a church wants to do a commercial spin-off of some kind, and then it sells a product or a service, and then the money goes then with a tax benefit back to the church again. And basically, he said the most famous example of this is the Language Institute Regina Caeli, otherwise known as the Nonnen van Vught, which of course most of us have heard of, as being, of course, a famous Dutch language institute where Queen Maxima, our Dutch queen, who's originally from Argentina, she learned her Dutch at this institute, and then the prophets basically went back to the nuns again. So Michiel was basically saying, yeah, so, the commercial spin-off then will be this cybersecurity company, and actually the church can be any ambi-stichting, any foundation that's certified as being charitable by the Dutch government. And he basically said, more or less, and then you can give all your profits to me. And NLNet that he works for is basically a 35-year-old ambi-stichting foundation that gives grants, subsidies, to open source projects, digital rights initiatives, and anything for open internet, and they've been doing this over 35 years. So, you know, I heard about all this, and I was just like, how can I not do this? But, you know, but then of course going into the startup ecosystem, you know, I was incubated at the Amsterdam Center for Entrepreneurship Incubator. And then, you know, there I was like pitching to a panel of venture capitalists, telling them I was giving my company away for €1 and I wanted to donate 90% of my profits to charity. And then, like, one of the VCs basically said, you're either crazy or a genius, and I have no idea which one. And then the other ones said, you're not starting a company, you're starting a movement. So, of course, I didn't see it at the time. You know, I hadn't even registered anything with the Chamber of Commerce yet. But, you know, but one thing leads to another thing leads to another thing, and that was 11 years ago, you know, and people used to ask me, if your company isn't commercial, who's going to trust you? Well, actually, turns out quite a few people have trusted us. You know, we've got 60 people in the company now. We've had hundreds of customers, including the European Commission. We security audited COVID apps during the pandemic. We do work on the Dutch energy grid, you know, everything from power transformers to mobile apps for Tennet and Eco Steden, but also Aegon, Ahold, you know, go to the Albert Heijn, look around. Everything you see, we've probably broken. And yeah, so, you know, so that was actually really good. And the best part about it is, you know, of course now we've got this company, we've got several million in revenue, but the best part is we've also donated, in the first 10 years of our company's existence, over €1 million to the NLNet Foundation. NLNet actually used some of that donation money to write grant proposals to the European Commission, at which point they got even more money from the EC, like, you know, tens of millions from the EC, and that actually led to the creation of NGI Zero, Next Generation Internet Zero, which is the largest open source funding project, not just in Europe, but in the world. And it's funded over 1,000 open source projects since its inception. And it was in part also the donation money that they used to hire somebody to write the grant proposals, because of course they can't use EC money to write EC grant proposals. So I'm really happy that we were able to use that donation money as a kind of multiplier to really be able to support open source and digital rights and everything that, you know, also my company, cybersecurity company, also stands for. So that was fantastic, and at a certain point also other entrepreneurs started coming up to me saying, hey Melanie, that's a fantastic company you've got there. You know, can you help us to start a similar company, but then in other areas? And that's when I started Nonprofit Ventures. And Nonprofit Ventures is a startup incubator that teaches steward ownership and new economic thinking. And of course, as a good secularized progressive, you know, I put everything into the context of post-growth, degrowth, donut economics, well-being economy. I mean, look, that was the language, you know, of the communities basically that I was coming from. And, you know, it's all good. And I've been really, really busy with those worlds. You know, Nonprofit Ventures, we've incubated roughly 80 startups across 6 cohorts. So all of them, you know, working on impact businesses, steward ownership, these kinds of topics. I'll get to steward ownership later. In fact, I'm teaching an entire workshop later on steward ownership that you're welcome to join. But yeah, so that was all good. And I can remember just, you know, at one point I was at this conference and I was on a panel and I was speaking with some guy, who knows, maybe he's here. But, you know, and it was just, you know, and I was just like, you know, and he was the founder of some big Dutch IT company, and I was just like, hey, so like post-growth entrepreneurship, you know, that I'm working on, you know, this is really great. Like, do you think you would ever do this? And then the guy looked at me and he was like, you need to understand something. That stuff is progressive. I'm a Christian. And I was like, okay, but isn't this Christian? But of course at the time I had no words for it, right? So I just kind of shrugged and I was just like, yeah, do? And I just kind of moved on with my life. And, you know, around that time also I was getting involved in some other different kinds of projects. I was also getting involved with some political lobbying. I was part of the Beyond Growth movement in European Parliament. We actually had a really big event in May of 2023 where we took over the European Parliament, and it was this huge progressive party. You know, it was all the green politicians and the academics and Extinction Rebellion, and, you know, we took over the entire place. And everyone who was everyone in the Beyond Growth movement was there, and it was an awesome party. And that was in May, but then in December, we basically got together in a different room in the European Parliament. And just the organizing team, Nonprofit Ventures, was involved with that. We were sitting there, and here we were in a small room talking about climate targets and reparations for the Global South. And then a couple buildings over, the Econ Committee of the European Parliament was busy restarting austerity in Europe. And there we were, feeling completely helpless. You know, understanding that given the way that politics have moved, all of our political mandate was just completely, you know, ebbing away. And, you know, and at a certain point, I'd invited a lobbyist friend into the room, and we basically got up on the mic and we were like, hey guys, so quick question here. How many people from the political right are here right now? No one. Okay, that's what we thought. How many political centrists are here? No one. Okay, we thought that too. What about business? Am I the only CEO here? Are there any other business people? No. No, but this was at that gathering. And then finally it was just like, and then that sustainable finance panel, like, were we really not able to find a single finance professional? It was all academics. Like, this, guys, is our problem. So it was just, for me, this rising frustration of just sort of understanding that the left couldn't get its, you know, out of its filter bubble. and leading to the gradual understanding that, like, in order to really fix the world's problems, we need to quit it with the polarization. And really be able to get people together so we can actually work together on common and shared problems. You know, and eventually I also, you know, had the privilege also to speak with Ann Pettifor, who was one of the architects of Jubilee 2000 from around the turn of the century, which was also a very large initiative between the progressives and the church, all the different sides of the church, for debt relief, that actually also wound up getting $100 billion in debt relieved basically to 20 developing countries, and this was done by the G8. You know, around the same time, I also was lobbying for something called the Rentmeestervennootschap, so the stewardship company in the Dutch Parliament. And what happened was we put up a petition, it collected 1,000 signatures. Joost Sneller from D66 picked it up, and then Femke Zeedijk from Nieuw Sociaal Contract also picked it up and co-sponsored it. A month later, it went up for a vote, and it passed. And if we actually looked at who voted for it, it got the straight progressive vote, it got the straight Christian vote, it even got the BBB, the farmers. Yes, the same farmers who drove their tractors, you know, to The Hague to protest the nitrogen issue. And the only people in the end who had actually voted against it were the VVD, PVV, and FVD. But we basically had a large majority, which in today's political climate is kind of crazy. But it really, you know, and that was sort of when I realized, wait a minute, this is how you do it. Like, this is actually, you know, and basically one thing kind of led to the other thing, which kind of led to the other thing. And then, you know, at a certain point, I came into contact with a Catholic organization that was called the Economy of Francesco. And it was basically the same kinds of new economic work that I was doing, but then it was coming from a very, well, in this case, Catholic viewpoint. So, I mean, there was, you know, stuff, yeah, I basically wound up accidentally meeting them, and then they invited me back to teach at a one-week Catholic summer school, and I was just like, okay, but like, I'm Jewish, so this is kind of weird. Like, what do I have to say to a room of Catholics? But, I taught my post-growth entrepreneurship materials. It really resonated. But then I stayed for the rest of the week. And then they started talking about things like, all the stuff in scripture, that's about business and economics. And, and then they also started going into, Catholic social teaching and, some of what the social stuff that was in there. And I was just like, whoa, I didn't know that this stuff existed. This is really cool, actually. So, so that was kind of, I think, where it started. And, things led to other things. I basically wound up also getting introduced to a religious sister who's the head of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences in Rome. And she's also an economist, and she was doing absolutely mind-blowing work. And I saw her, she had some YouTube videos before I talked with her. I was watching these videos, and I was like, oh my God. Because what I saw was just this, complete embodied faith, tightly mixed with vocation, with, the same kinds of new economics work that I'd been doing for, a decade. And then I saw her, and it was kind of like, the only comparison I can make is, I don't know if you know the Saint Edith Stein, Teresa Benedict of the Cross, but in her story, she basically read an autobiography of a different saint called Teresa of Avila. She read it in one night, and then she said, "This is the truth." I watched these YouTube videos of this nun, and I was like, this is the truth. And that was kind of the first thing. But then after that, I went to South by Southwest in Texas. I met actually some, it turned out that they had a Christian side event that was called SVC service that was part of South by. The very first day, there were panels on redemptive business and redemptive finance. And I thought, okay, this is really interesting. And I went, and a bunch of guys from Faith Driven Investor were there, so Harry Kessner and Henry Kessner and all those, that crowd. And I listened to them, and I was like, wow, this is so inspiring. And 3 days later, I found myself back in my Airbnb on my knees at 3 in the morning, asking Jesus to forgive my sins and to lead me. So, yeah, and at that point I was like, what now? So, yeah, so at this point it was sort of like the Catholics got me through the first half, the Protestants got me through the second half. And I'm coming from Judaism, and I'm just like, okay, I guess I better learn everything. So, I sort of started my, ecumenical church rotation. So basically every Saturday evening I was going to the Rieback Catholic Church for the vigil mass, on Saturday evenings, and then Sunday mornings I was going to Crossroads in Amstelveen. So why do you have to choose? And similarly also, part of the reason I think kind of why I felt called and sort of converted, in the end was because I kind of realized that we needed some people from the extreme left who could basically build those kinds of bridges, and I knew that very few people from the left would be willing to do this. And at a certain point I was just like, okay, I have to do it. And also around that same time, I kind of became completely, utterly obsessed. Basically reading everything I could get my hands on, from, of course, New Testament, but also, Christian apologetics, Catholic social teaching, Simone Weil, basically everything. So, but some of the stuff that I kind of saw in my head at that time has already been happening, because I figured, I can bridge this, and it's 9 months later, here I am standing giving a keynote for you guys here. I've also been privileged enough that I've also been invited to participate in the Christian Economic Forum. But also on the Catholic side, I've been very busy with the economy of Francesco. I've also been busy with the Francesco Collaborative, also, which is like the finance side of that same thing. So I'm just still bouncing around like a ping pong ball, kind of, on every side at this point. But yeah, it's all good. I mean, at a certain point, of course, you have to take the final steps. And anyway, in April, I'm getting baptized. So. So anyway, if none of you have anything to do on Easter, the Saturday before Easter. But in either case, yeah, so that's kind of part of it. But, I've also been taking a lot of kind of my secular work, things like running startup incubators, and I've been starting to integrate explicit Christian faith with this. So, and with the economy of Francesco, one of my first big projects was creating a startup incubator for, well, basically, in this case, it was economy of Francesco, so it was explicitly a Catholic incubator. But I created a 1-minute trailer that I would like to play just to give you a little bit of an impression of what the incubator was like. So, just a moment, and I will, 1 sec. Here we go. So that gives you a little bit of an impression of what we're creating. So it was really great to be able to create it on the Catholic side. I would also like to try and create one moving forward on the Protestant side, because again, like ping pong ball, right? And I've actually been talking already with Heya and also with Aaron about setting up a BAM incubator. We don't yet have a date on it, but what I would like to say is if you have interest in such a BAM incubator, please contact Heya, and if you could just give her a little bit of a indication of interest. It would probably be roughly a 5-day event. It would be at the Stadsklooster in Dordrecht, and yeah, it would roughly mix sort of what I call non-extractive organizations, so a lot about sort of redemptive business models and governance structures, but then mixing it with real practical work of things like lean startup, business model canvases, pitch training, actual real practical like mom testing, practical stuff to get a startup going. So if any of you have any interest in participating in such a thing, please talk with Heya, and if enough of you respond positively, then who knows, maybe we can make this happen. So that is one thing that I want to say. So that being said, we're now moving towards Christmas. And of course, looking forward, of course, also looking back, of course, to the historical birth of Jesus, but of course, it's so much more than historical, right? I mean, we're looking back to the birth, but we're also looking forward. There was his first coming, and we're looking forward to his second coming. And but there's a third gazing that we're actually doing at this moment now, and it's not really backwards or forwards, but it's actually just looking at right now. And really just asking ourselves the question of how is it that God is being born in us each day. So with that, I would also like just to, if I can, take you through a little meditation that I hope can provide you guys with a bit of inspiration to also look inwards and to really think about how you as well can play a part of that in being redemptive and perhaps also prophetic business people. So first, what I would like is if you can just sit, just relax a little bit, just take a bit of a comfortable position in your chairs. And I'm going to put on some music to listen to, and just try, if you can, just to move yourselves into this music a little bit. So now I'd like to just guide you really quickly through what's called an Ignatian meditation. And if you're not already familiar with this, it's a way to be able to encounter the scriptures on the basis of our imagination, and then to try and attempt to allow God to work through that encounter. So first, I would just like to ask you to close your eyes and to imagine yourself standing outside of a small home in Nazareth. You're at a hillside village, and there's modest stone houses. There's dust on the ground, and there's an afternoon light softening towards evening. And you hear a quiet movement inside the house. Mary is working. She's a young woman absorbed in her daily tasks. And the simplicity of the home is striking. A clay lamp, a spindle, a folded cloth. Watch the scene as the messenger appears. There's a presence, a shift in the air. and you hear the greeting, "Rejoice, the Lord is with you." You watch Mary's face, perplexed, thoughtful, discerning. And then you hear the promise, a child, a savior, a kingdom without end. And then you hear Mary's question, how can this be? And then finally you see her breath deepen as she speaks. "Let it be done according to your word." Now take a step closer, feeling the dirt underneath your feet. Smell the bread baking nearby, and stand where you wish in the room, near the doorway, besides the table. You are now inside that story. Now imagine that the messenger's words are spoken to you. Imagine hearing your name. Imagine hearing the greeting, "The Lord is with you." Imagine this call, maybe faint, maybe unclear, perhaps surprising, but real. A call towards a future much larger than your imagination. A call into deeper generosity. A call to create something new. Simply notice. Do you feel disturbance, curiosity, fear, or openness? Hear the invitation that God seeks to do something in your life, through your work, or within your vocation. And now imagine your own response, whatever it might be. Is it a yes? Is it a not yet? Is it a question? A desire for clarity? A desire for courage? Whatever arises, let it be free and let it be yours. And we'll conclude with a final moment of gratitude. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. So this is it, right? And it's really, in that sense, it's that call, it's that messenger, and it's that ascent that has brought us all here. It certainly brought me here. And I guess looking forward towards the future, really the question becomes, how is it that we are going to continue with that listening, and that we can continue with that surrender and with giving that ascent?